Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Lakers Theory podcast. I am Shane Jackson. Joined with me is Austin Case. I have fresh new podcast equipment with a webcam, new monitor, and all that thanks to my girlfriend's family. And unfortunately, the first time I reveal it is for a terrible podcast. Two podcasts ago, I said it'd be our best podcast yet. This might be our worst. We're recording literally minutes after a loss by the Lakers to the Blazers, 115-107. And the only way I can sum up it is that it was a frustrating loss. Is that fair, Austin?
Yeah, that's very fair. I was yelling at the TV, and that's probably a light way to put it. I threw the pillows at the couch and had a pillow fight with the couch. So, I mean, I was frustrated, but what can you do?
Yeah, well, we can't do anything because we're not playing the game or having any say whatsoever. But I didn't think I would care at all about a regular season loss because the Lakers are, how many ever days removed from winning a title. But this one hurt. I got my wine because it's probably the only way I'm going to manage to do this podcast. We will recap both games because this is the first time we've recorded since Christmas Day. This will be a mostly Blazers podcast. I thought win or lose, it was going to be the most relevant game because that Minnesota win by the Lakers, which was the night before last night. We're recording on Monday, December 28th. It was Sunday, December 27th. That was a 127-91 win for the Lakers without Anthony Davis. I don't think I really took a whole lot from that game, but we did learn a lot, I think, tonight, or at least enough to talk about it in podcast form. And really, I'm going to mention it multiple times throughout this podcast. It's probably going to be the title in this podcast, but frustrating is probably the best way to describe what is the Lakers' second loss of the 2020-2021 season. They're now 2-2 on the year. It just felt like the Lakers let that one slip away. Entering tonight, the Lakers were 59-0 when leading after three quarters. That streak obviously snapped. I think they had a 1-point lead going into the fourth quarter. And I don't think it was necessarily all what the Blazers did. I thought, I questioned the energy and effort that the Lakers had for a lot of the stretch there in the fourth quarter. And then I thought Frank Vogel tinkered with the lineup too much. We'll get into all of that when we recap this pod. But Austin, what was the most frustrating part to you about tonight's loss to the Blazers?
So I feel like late there in the game, the Lakers were being really aggressive offensively, getting to the basket. They just – I feel like they couldn't get a good call when, they really needed it there late in the game. And I really hate to put it that way because I don't want to kind of say the officiating is what caused the loss because, they had chances to win this game. But, the play that stuck out to me is LeBron drives to the lane. He's got a guy wrapped around one arm and another dude swatting at the ball on the other side. And the Lakers just take the ball out of bounds. So that was really frustrating to me. Honestly, AD gets beat up anytime he's in the post and he has the ball. So I don't expect to have a call every time he's down there and getting smacked around. But like the LeBron call, the LeBron no call, that kind of really irritated me. But they started the game well, and it kind of down the stretch and throughout the course of the game, it just kind of seemed like they didn't have the energy to really get over that hump and get the win.
Yeah, and that's what stood out to me. I kind of alluded to it just a little bit ago, but it really felt like the Lakers let that one slip away because, as you mentioned, the energy part, I understand it was the second game of back-to-back, but, they came out so strong there, and they did have the lead going into the fourth quarter, and that's just when you're the defending champs, you're supposed to put end it right there, right? I mean, that's when you're supposed to close things out and you're supposed to put the game away and not give the opposition any reason for momentum or any reason for optimism down the stretch. And Gary Trent Jr. hit 3 straight threes early in the fourth quarter because Talen Horton-Tucker was on him, and he floated off his man a little bit and let those shots go down. And then Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum helped. The combination of them helped close the game out. And then offensively, there was just nobody that wanted to like end the game other than, LeBron had his moments there in the fourth quarter, but AD wasn't nearly as effective as he should have been. And it just felt like on both ends of the floor, the energy was lacking a little bit. And I think this was Frank Vogel like doing some sort of his lineup tinkering and stuff like that, because he did this last year too. He kind of accepts defeat sometimes just to see how things work out. I mean, that was the case last year. And tonight, that's really the only explanation of sticking with the lineup he did. He had, I believe it was AD, Harrell, LeBron, KCP, and Schroeder as his 5 in there. And nothing about that game would have suggested that needing stops down the stretch, we're going to rely on Harrell. I mean, Marc Gasol was probably the best defensive player of the night for the Lakers, which is actually saying how bad the Lakers were defensively. But and he wasn't in the lineup down the stretch. I think, with a minute and a half, 2 minutes left in the game, when it's a 6-point game, 5-point game, whatever it is, not having AD at the 5 to close things out. I mean, why isn't that an option? And it's just stuff like that makes you think, okay, this is Frank Vogel and the Lakers accepting, hey, a loss on December 28th to the Blazers doesn't mean anything to them. It is, let's see if this lineup works. Let's see what doesn't work about this lineup, and let's learn from this moving forward. And if that's an option that we can have in June and July, that's what matters. And yes, right now, when we are drinking wine and talking about this game, it sucks. But in the summer, when we're talking about this team, maybe we look back and go, yeah, now I see.
Yeah, I got really upset that kind of like they let this game go, but I try to remind myself that, they had just over 2 months of rest after winning a championship. So they're probably not that worried about game 4 of the season. So, but like you kind of mentioned it, Gasol not being in there down the stretch probably means that Vogel's really trying to see what late game rotations might benefit them in certain situations. It seemed like there was a handful of possessions on the defensive end for them that they didn't have somebody that could really get a board. And so it was like, I think one possession that, the Portland got like 2, maybe 3 offensive boards right in a row, that just kind of allowed them to kind of, not just extend their lead a little bit. Like it wasn't a big lead, but I think they're having Gasol kind of be a somewhat rim protector that he can be would have been really beneficial. The Lakers didn't give up too many offensive boards, but the ones they did kind of really, really got them. So having a big there late in the game probably would have been beneficial.
Yeah, and I think going back to what I was trying to say, like I understand not necessarily caring as much about Game 4, what happens win or loss in Game 4, and that's not really what I'm concerned about. It's for me, it's the Lakers were right there. I mean, like they led by 1 entering the fourth quarter. It was a 1-point game, with 5 minutes to go. It was a 1 possession, maybe 2 possession game at most for most of the final few minutes. It's just it was right there for their taking. And if you would think that, regardless if you care about the game or not, at that point you care, right? Like it's a game, and I think you do. So I don't know. That's the part that doesn't sit well with me, especially coming one night right after a big win. over Minnesota. I'd say like big win in terms of the final score. It just felt like, hey, the Lakers, when they have the opportunity to strike, like that's if you think you are the best in the NBA, that's when you do it. And I don't think it's the Blazers were shooting lights out by any means. Like Gary Trent Jr., yes, he went off. Damian Lillard weirdly had like the quietest 30-point game ever, but he hit 1 or 2 threes down the stretch as well. But I don't think it was just like the season opener was where Paul George just kind of went off. I thought these guys had their moments, yes, but the Lakers were right there in there all the way.
Yeah, and maybe that says something about the Lakers where it seems like they have these bad games in our eyes, but they only lose by 6 or 7 points. So, but I mean, it sucks that they didn't really try to go get this win when it was right there. But AD played 38 minutes, LeBron played 36. That's a lot of time.
Yeah, they played their season 9 minutes, both of them.
Yeah. And so they were probably gassed a little bit, but yeah, it's frustrating that they didn't try to get this one when it was right there.
Yeah, and I think the energy part is the biggest deal of it, right? Like, because the first quarter, I mean, this team came out with a lot of energy. They were leading by 13 at one point. LeBron, who hurt his ankle and people didn't know he was going to play, was the big guy leading the way there in the first quarter. He was jumping up in the air and dunking it. He was, running full core. And it was just like, okay, they're just going to kind of put their foot to the pedal and run them out of the gym. And then I think after the first quarter in general, the energy just died out. And I'm kind of following along their post-game quotes. And Frank Vogel pretty much said as such just now. Like, it's their offense and defense, the energy just kind of died. And I think at some point there in the second quarter, LeBron came off the floor, and all of a sudden there wasn't as much ball movement. And I think the Lakers have run into this problem without Marc Gasol or LeBron on the floor through all 4 games. But there wasn't much ball movement. There wasn't much off-ball movement, I would say. And it was a lot of just like dribble and drive and everybody staying around and watching. And that was kind of the start of it for me, where I was like, uh-oh. Like, and the Blazers did hit some shots. They got back in it. And it was just like, this is not looking as, I guess, smooth as it did in the first quarter. And I don't think the Lakers ever got back into that sort of groove on either end of the floor, really. But defensively, they were really bad. But I don't think they were ever what they were there in the first quarter on the offensive end either. I guess, what could the Lakers have done differently? I don't know. Down the stretch in particular, or at all at any point in the game, is there something that you wish they would have done differently?
Personally, I'm not sure what they could have done differently. It seems like they're probably still trying to find kind of what works, what guys click, especially late in the game when they're trailing a little bit. But I probably have Gasol in there, especially in this game, because Harrell was kind of outmatched playing the 5 there, which really limited his rebounding abilities somewhat. I can't think of Portland's 5, who their
Nurkic.
5 is. Yeah. Like, Harrell's undersized compared to him. So, and I saw that Harrell's bouncing off the floor trying to get boards, and it just wasn't working. So I think late in the game there, especially against a team who has a typical big, you probably also want a big in there just to match that, especially if you're getting good defensive effort, but you're just not getting the board. Like that's going to be an issue. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I would do in this game.
Yeah, I understand, not playing AD as much at the center position during the regular season. He's obviously going to have to do it in the postseason, which is why you accept him not playing the bulk of the minutes there in the regular season. But when it's down the stretch like that and you needed to close out that lineup, I feel like he should have been the 5, and Kuzma probably should have been in there. and had him on Covington, and maybe that would have been the matchup that could have made a difference for me. Marcus obviously would have been first choice, but he played 19 minutes, so maybe he doesn't have that many more minutes in him. But yeah, I think even if it's just for the final 90 seconds, 2 minutes, like put 80 at the 5 and go with that lineup. And maybe we'll see that. Again, this is not something new. Frank Vogel, he did this last year, so I expect him to still kind of tinker with the lineups as well. The Lakers did play without Alex Caruso. I thought that was painfully obvious. It was just – we've made such a big deal, I think, and rightfully so, about the interior defense of the Lakers. And I think somewhat it's overstated because, Lakers, yes, they could improve at their rim protection, obviously. That's what they lost in Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee. But with AD potentially playing more postseason 5 minutes, like you're just living with your 2.5 center, situation going on in the regular season, right? I think the perimeter defense was really a liability tonight. And I think Alex Caruso would have made a big difference there. I think he adds so much to that perimeter defense. I thought Kyle Kuzma defended very well again. We talked about him a lot. But THT just had no answer for the Blazers. He was struggling on the defensive end. He only played 10 minutes. I thought you saw his length there, especially in the second quarter, where he could just get to the rim at ease. But defensively, he was a liability. And then as I said earlier, he was the reason why Gary Trent Jr. got going there in the third quarter and hit a few threes in a row because he helped off his man. So, but I think in general, like I wasn't pleased with the perimeter defense by a lot of players. And I think Alex Caruso's absence was kind of understated for much of that game until the end.
Yeah, THT had a pretty bad night defensively. I remember a play where he just got lost on who he was supposed to pick up, and it just happened to be Gary Trent Jr. and he hits an open three, and so that was an issue. Their perimeter defense was pretty bad tonight, and you kind of saw that last year too. I remember them, kind of saying the Lakers were pretty bad on perimeter defense. But yeah, not having Alex Caruso tonight, that was pretty obvious. He's probably underrated for his defensive abilities, and that's why he's out there for his defensive abilities. And so I really think that was kind of obvious not having him.
And he would have been great for a Blazers backcourt that likes to kind of run around there, and he could have chased them around. So I can't believe we went this long without saying really the biggest key, I think, of all of this was Anthony Davis was not good. That's just he missed on Sunday night. I don't know how, or Monday night. What is it? Oh, I'm reading my clock wrong because it's after midnight. We record this in Kansas. And it is Tuesday morning. But no, it was Sunday night's game, and Anthony Davis missed the game. So I don't know how much of that injury was affecting him tonight, but he played 38 minutes, shot 6 of 14 from the floor. He had a plus-minus of +5, scored 13 points. And I don't think he was any good, really, on either end of the floor. And I think there was a play there, which, by the way, was my favorite play of the night. I think I tweeted about it. I handle the updates on our Lakers Theory Twitter account, @Lakers Theory. But I tweeted about it. It was that pick and roll between him and Marc Gasol. That was the best play of the night, by the way. But other than that, I didn't see a whole lot of plays where I was like, yeah, this is Anthony Davis. And remember, you said he was going to be the NBA MVP entering the year. There were Dudley suggested that he had an MVP-like season ahead of him. We're 4 games in, and we haven't seen that. And if the Lakers were ever going to need him, in the regular season, at this point in the regular season, tonight was the night. He just didn't play well at all. What do you think was wrong with AD's game?
Honestly, I just feel like he wasn't aggressive. And, we see that a lot where at the beginning of the games they really get AD going and he's real aggressive at the start. And that was LeBron tonight. LeBron scored like the first 7 or 9 points of the game for the Lakers. And usually that's kind of where that's sometimes AD. So like they didn't get him going early, and maybe the injury from the prior game kind of was still there, lingering, and really affected him a little bit. But yeah, I mean, Lakers are going to need AD, especially late in the game when it's close. And tonight just wasn't his night. Hopefully, it's because of injury. But I mean, maybe he was tired. He took a entry pass and kind of like landed straight on his tailbone, and I can only imagine that hurt. So he was probably hampered by that a little bit, but I mean, it was just a rough night for AD.
He had back-to-back buckets there, I think, in the third quarter. One of them was like an and one. I thought, okay, here we go. AD is starting to be more aggressive. We'll get an assertive AD down the stretch, and that didn't happen. I think you're right, though. It was probably the lack of aggression more than anything else. And obviously can't have that. I don't want to overstate one game for AD because he's stupid talented. But it just – when you look at this game and when we think back, I don't know how much we're going to think about a game in late December in Portland, but it's probably as simple as, hey, AD did play well, and that was the difference in the game for the Lakers. So was there anything else from this game that stood out that you thought was worth mentioning before we dive into the Minnesota win?
I really don't think so. Like the Lakers just look bad. They started out really well, and then they just kind of, got lost. That's probably a good way to put it for me. They kind of just got lost in the game, and they couldn't hang on. So, on to the next one, though.
Really frustrating loss. Obviously won't matter if they have another trophy at the end of the year, but it's just one of those losses tonight that it really stings to have to go to sleep with a loss like that. We'll real quick for anybody listening to the audio version of this podcast. Again, we are the Lakers Theory podcast. You can find us on all the audio platforms except for Apple iTunes because Austin is still not able to do that. That's his one and only job, and he's not done that. But we're on Spotify and all that other crap that you listen to your audio podcasts on. Eventually, we'll be on Apple iTunes. But I'll list out some of those stats from this game in case you are listening to the audio form. The video form has the box score up on it so you can see it while we were talking. But LeBron James led the team with 29 points. Schroeder had 24 points. We didn't really talk about him, but obviously he was just as quick and fast as ever. When he gets around that screen, he really gets to the rim. And KCP had 14 points, hit a few threes early. Thought they were more credit to the passing, but Austin was very excited about his three-point shooting early. And then Anthony Davis, as we mentioned, finished with 13 points. Let's move on to the Minnesota game. Again, we'll keep this one brief because it happened at this point forever ago, but Austin will bring in the box score for that. But yeah, the Lakers won that one 127-91. This was without AD, and I really thought it was just a fun basketball game. I don't know if there was anything. Again, when you're not playing with one of the two stars and the other team is missing their best player in Karl-Anthony Towns, I don't think there's a whole lot to glean from that game. But what stood out to you, Austin?
Well, honestly, Kuz, he had a really awesome game, and kind of it was nice to see. I'm a Kuz guy, so anytime he plays well, I'm gonna love it. But like this, just kind of this was a really good Lakers team, just kind of beating up on a team missing their best player. That's kind of how I looked at it. Like everybody got involved. Almost everybody scored. It looks like, Antetokounmpo was the only guy not to get a bucket, but like it was just an easy game for them, and that's probably what you want to see from the Lakers when they're playing lesser teams and maybe even a team missing their best player. Like you want to see them kind of beat up on them a little bit and also get everybody involved.
Yeah, I always say that about the NFL teams. If you were the sign of a great team is one that can just really obliterate bad teams in football, because almost every game is like within a touchdown. But if you can just put a bad team away, that's a sign of a great team. And so yes, this is very important for the Lakers to do so and get everybody involved. The only thing that really stood out to me was Marcus Gasol. We had mentioned this after Christmas Day. Actually, you had tweeted about it. This is when you were handling some of the updates in the first couple of games. But you had already started to question Marcus Gasol's fit on this team. After 2 games, you were already throwing the towel on Marcus Gasol. But he played a lot better in Game 3. He actually looked at the rim. He was 3 for 3 from downtown, 4 for 4 from the floor. He scored 12 points. He was one of 4 starters in double figures. And really, it was the passing that stood out to me. He had 8 assists. I believe half of them were to Kyle Kuzma. And he just had a knack for making the play passing-wise. And I think you could sense his basketball IQ that is really not matched by anybody on the floor other than LeBron James. So, it was good to see. Obviously, there are still limitations with Marcus Gasol, but I thought this game was important because – it wasn't just you. There were people questioning whether or not he was done for his career, right? And if you are done, you don't have a game like that, I think. Like, it's just he had enough good moments that I think it's just a matter of him fitting with this team. And, he's not going to be obviously one of their best players by any means, but if you're going to get a decent 20 minutes out of him, I think the Lakers are going to live with that.
Yeah, I'll be happy if at the end of the season I'm eating my words on that. But that's probably what you want from him, hitting the few shots that he gets and really kind of playing to his strength of being kind of a big that can, is really good at finding the open guy or finding the cutter. So I was happy to kind of see the type of game he had, and I really hope he can kind of channel that throughout the season. He probably doesn't need to be stellar every game, but
no,
it's nice to know that it's there and he can bring that out if needed.
I also think it's important to note that this was, again, as we said, a game without Anthony Davis. He's in the starting rotation. He's got a different, unique role probably, whereas he's almost deferring to, LeBron, AD, who are dominant, playmakers, and Schroeder, who's a, primary ball handler. So he's almost deferring to so many different guys that it's hard to get into much of an offensive rhythm, I think. And so I think you saw a glimpse of what he has to offer because there was one less guy who demands the ball for him. But he does a great job of looking for people who are moving off the ball, which is why I think he found Kuzma so often, who got to start, by the way, in AD's place, because Kuzma did a great job moving off the ball. And I thought Kuzma played great, as you mentioned. He led the way with 20 points in that game. Again, it was a 127-91 win over Minnesota. The Lakers are 2-2. Austin, any final thoughts before we head out of here?
I do not have any.
Okay, that'll do it for this podcast. Again, we will record sometime this week. The Lakers have a back-to-back, as we just learned on the schedule, against the Spurs. Not quite back-to-back because there's a day in between, but it's Wednesday and Friday. So I think the plan for us, again, would be to record Friday night and recap 2 games again. But if Wednesday's game is really interesting and we want to hop on for another 20 minutes, we will probably do it Wednesday night and then Friday night as well. But as of right now, the plan is to record definitely Friday night and have a podcast on Saturday. But for constant updates of when our podcast schedule is, you can follow us on social media. That is on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, at Lakers Theory. This has been the Lakers Theory podcast following a frustrating loss to the Blazers. He's Austin Case. I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.